We were definitely broke, but we were not like the absolute worst case scenario or the worst things imaginable. But a lot of those things carried over for me into my 20s and 30s. And so even when I started earning a good bit of money after school and after really climbing my way up the corporate ladder, a lot of those beliefs around scarcity and work and overwork had really started to compound and affect the way that I was treating myself and certainly the way that I was viewing the world. And what I soon came to realize, how I started to treat other people who were important to me, like this one over here.
I spent the rest of my adolescence here in Atlanta, surrounded by successful Black people, seeing Black government. I went to college and in North Carolina, and I just had a very different understanding of how money flowed. I felt that it was accessible to me. I was aware of, racism and stereotypes, but I never felt limited by it in a very real way. And so that certainly shaped the way that I viewed money. I felt like it was always available, that I just needed to find it, get access to it. And I spent a lot of time believing that making money was much easier than managing it. And that's what led me to mounds and mounds of credit card debt.
The 15-year career is basically looking at your career instead of this 30, 40-year, however long you want it to be, sort of marathon, and shrinking that into a bit of a 15-year sprint that's broken up into 5-year sort of increments. The first 5 years with respect to managing your debt is really being aggressive and doing everything that you can to get that under control, keeping your cost of living as low or as reasonably low as possible, with the primary focus of paying off that debt and maximizing your investing. Years 6 through 10 are really around recognizing that you've gone through that period, and now with this extra cash flow or extra cushion that you have from paying off that debt, you can really ramp up your investments above and beyond the standard recommended 10 to 15%.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. We are so excited for today because it was planned in the past, but we had to reschedule, and I am able to be here for a conversation I was so excited about being a part of, and I couldn't at the last time. So Jackie, introduce these fabulous guests that we have.
Yeah, I think this is a time that was meant to be. We've got Julien and Kiersten Saunders, but I remember when we tried to record before, you got the last minute opportunity to see your son. So that was absolutely worth it. And they had this crazy noise going on that just wouldn't let up. But you know what? We are excited because this was just meant to be. So let me introduce Kiersten and Julien Saunders. They are authors of the book Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away, published by Penguin Random House. In 2023, it was named Best Overall Book about Investing by Business Insider and one of the best personal finance books by Forbes. They are also the creative voices behind the blog Rich and Regular, which is how I know them from back in the day. They are hosts and producers of the award-winning video series Money on the Table, the highest quality YouTube you can find. And they are also hosts of the Rich and Regular podcast, which has earned over 3 million downloads since its launch. So what started as a blog in 2017 has grown into a multimedia powerhouse, and all centered around their mission to inspire better conversations about money. Their fascinating money story has been featured in the New York Times, CBS This Morning, Good Morning America, the Oprah Winfrey Network, MarketWatch, Forbes, and the documentary Playing with Fire, and so much more. They are based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they have one son, Bo, who's got some fierce baseball skills and just might be the next MLB standout. So Julien and Kiersten, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Wow, thank you.
That was awesome.
Yeah, well, there's so much more to it, but you guys have your hands in just about everything, and you're making a huge difference in our space and outside of our space. we're just happy to have you on the show. And you said you were happy to be guests and no longer hosting for a change. Makes it a little bit easier because we got all the stress.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Meanwhile, I'm still over here tinkering with sound. Like I don't know how to be a guest. So it feels like I'm new.
Yeah, you guys got two mics. You're looking good. So we're just thrilled to have you today. Like I said, it was meant to be. So we had a lot to talk about. I remember when you guys were, I think, both working when you started Rich and Regular. Were you both working when you first started it?
We sure were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
In
that.
2017. Yeah.
And then it's transitioned to a cashing out episode, which we'll get to. But in order to understand you a little better, I think we have to talk a little bit about your individual money stories, because one of the strengths you have in your book and in your platform is you help couples overcome differences with their money stories. Julien, maybe you'll start and tell us about where you came from. And Kiersten came from a drastically different background, and we'll have to hear her story as well.
Yeah, so my story really begins in Brooklyn, New York in the 1980s. I just knew it as home at the time. It really wasn't until the 2000s where you started to watch documentaries and people reflecting back on the 80s in New York and the Reagan era and sort of calling it the sort of drug era or the crack era. I remember seeing those things, but again, at the time, it was just what I saw as normal. Obviously, as someone who's in their mid 40s now, I look back and I actually do sort of cringe a little bit at some of the things that I thought was just completely normal. But it was just a regular, everyday upbringing for me. And for the most part, we didn't live in the worst part of Brooklyn. We lived kind of like a little away from it, but you still saw those things every single day. But you know, you could see where the money was, and it wasn't where we were. It was like across the river over there in Manhattan, and my mom worked in Manhattan. My father worked there as well. We didn't have much. Again, it wasn't the worst, but that was all relative compared to some things that were really, really bad. I grew up in a mostly Caribbean household, and so with that comes a really strong set of cultural beliefs around work ethic and Christianity. And so all of that to say, we were definitely broke, but we were not like the absolute worst case scenario or the worst things imaginable. But a lot of those things carried over for me into my 20s and 30s. And so even when I started earning a good bit of money after school and after really climbing my way up the corporate ladder, a lot of those beliefs around scarcity and work and overwork had really started to compound and affect the way that I was treating myself and certainly the way that I was viewing the world. And what I soon came to realize, how I started to treat other people who were important to me, like this one over here.
Yeah.
You referred to your life upbringing as the good times life upbringing, as in the TV show.
Yeah.
And Kiersten refers to her upbringing, the American middle class in Texas, as the Cosby show.
Yeah.
Why did you say that, Kiersten? Is it really true? I love the analogy, though.
I mean, it was one of the few representation that we had on television of middle-class Black families. I mean, later on, when I was older, there was like Family Matters and, you know, A Different World came after that. But at the time, it was one of the few representations that we had, and my life was very similar. My parents weren't doctors and lawyers, but they were in corporate America. And in the 80s and 90s, to see Black people in corporate America was just like very rare, especially if they're not in secretarial positions or some other admin roles. And so, yeah, to your point, I'm from Texas. I'm like 4th or 5th generation Texan, like just the whole family was there. My grandmother was actually born on a sharecropper field in Louisiana when she was a baby. And then they moved to Texas once they got officially free from that contract. And so we've raised tons and tons of family members. I come from a big family. We moved to Atlanta when I was in elementary school, so kindergarten, 1st grade. And I spent the rest of my adolescence here in Atlanta, surrounded by successful Black people, seeing Black government. I went to college and in North Carolina, and I just had a very different understanding of how money flowed. I felt that it was accessible to me. I was aware of, you know, racism and stereotypes, but I never felt limited by it in a very real way. And so that certainly shaped the way that I viewed money. I felt like it was always available, that I just needed to find it, get access to it. And I spent a lot of time believing that making money was much easier than managing it. And that's what led me to mounds and mounds of credit card debt. Like I got hit with the consumerism bug very early and very fast. And by the time we met, I just had a totally different mindset about spending and earning than he did, presumably because of our backgrounds, because of the access and exposure we'd had to money all our lives.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about that credit card debt, but Julien, obviously money wasn't flowing for you as you were growing up, and you did go to college. And did you have to pay your own way through school? Like, what was that experience like trying to get yourself through college and earn a degree?
Yeah, so this is where the Jamaican joke comes in, right? So if there's one thing we know about Jamaicans is that they're going to have multiple jobs. Yeah. And that was something that I took great pride in. And so I did take out student loans, but I was always working. I worked through, and I have 3 degrees. I graduated from culinary school. So in a past life, I was a professional chef. I graduated from culinary school while working full time. I went to undergrad and got a business degree and worked full time while also being a student leader. And then in graduate school, I went through the MBA program while working full time and working part time at the actual university. And the reason why I did that last part was because I learned during undergrad that if you did an assistantship, a graduate assistantship, you could essentially be considered an employee of the school. And as a result, one of the benefits was you would waive tuition. And so I basically earned my MBA with basically, I think tuition was $25. And then I was paid a stipend on top of that for the work that I was doing for the school.
That's incredible. I mean, Jackie worked her way through school. Yeah. I was one of those sort of privileged upper middle class people that really didn't have to do that, but I leveraged scholarships. I know I worked all the way through things, but I didn't have to pay for my own school due to scholarships and assistance from my father. I am very impressed with stories like yours, Julien, and like Jackie's, where you double duty, really, working through school, and in that way leverage the ability to come out debt free. And one of the things, Julien, that with all your focus on money and the problem that Kiersten had with credit card debt, in moving into the relationship when you met, there was a bit of a problem, a bit of strife and conflict and friction here because, and I'll out you here, if I knew you had credit card debt, I never would have dated you. Mm-hmm. That was a bit testy, and you knew your budget like, everybody else knew their social security number. And Kiersten had upwards of like $30,000 of credit card debt. What happened there? Because this led, if I may say, to a breakup of the relationship and you had to re-knit yourselves back together. Tell us that story.
Yeah. Tell them that story, Julien.
It's really weird hearing it now because obviously we did write those words and it did happen. Like that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly what I said. And I was trying to be hurtful, but also being really clear about where I felt. And the reason for that was because I just knew where I wanted to go. And I knew the role that debt had played in my life. And I just did not believe at the time that I could build a life with someone who did not have a similar understanding of wealth building and debt management. Now, I was obviously wrong about that, and I didn't give her enough credit for her ability to change. And I certainly did not I gave myself a bit too much credit because I felt like my strict and inflexible belief and understanding on money was just the right way and that there was no wiggle room. And so all of that to say, I'm glad we had that argument, and I'm still glad today because without that argument before us really deciding to build a life together, I don't know that we would have had the kinds of transparent conversations that we had around debt. And I don't know that we would have been forced to confront our own beliefs because, again, it was not just me reacting to the debt that she had because respectfully, that does not sound like that much debt now, but back then it seemed like it was such a huge, insurmountable, like grossly irresponsible amount of debt. But at the time, it just felt like, that's crazy. I can't believe you would go so long without taking care of this thing. And so, looking back, it's different. But like I said, I'm glad that we had that confrontation and that we grew from it.
Yeah. And Julien, I'm thinking, you were kind of working your way through what you had to pay. And Kiersten was sitting there, sorry, Kiersten,
yeah.
saying, oh, the money's flowing. Why are you working so hard?
Yeah. Keep the party going.
Are you glad you had that blow up and that disagreement?
I am. And I can only say that with the 2020 vision of hindsight,
Right.
because at the time I was hot. I was embarrassed and I did not understand. But I am very grateful for the timing of that intervention, because if I had carried all of that debt with no urgency on how to fix it or prevent it from happening again into my 30s, my life would be very different right now. Like there wouldn't be a cashing out. There wouldn't be a story of being able to save and invest large amounts of money during my peak earning years, or what I thought were my peak earning years. There just wouldn't have been the conclusion that we're at now. And so I am grateful. I wish it had happened differently, but you don't get to choose. Like
Right.
sometimes the conflict is just how it comes. And the only thing that you can do is decide what role that moment plays in your larger story.
Well, I had the same problem. I came out of residency with $25,000, $30,000 of credit card debt. And I really feel for students these days, professional students that are coming out with six figures of debt, because that's an anchor around a relationship that you have to figure out a way that you're going to manage. You guys referred to Kiersten's debt was like the sun to her. She loved to bask in it, and she'd never look it straight in the eye. And I felt very much the same way. I had revolving credit card debt. I'm like, okay, this is no problem. Americans, live on debt and bring their expenses forward. I deserve these vacations, like the one you had to Panama that caused trouble there. And, it just wasn't top of mind. And you said too, and I'd like to quote you here because these are important statements. I was more embarrassed that I'd opened my heart to a man who refused to compromise than I was about having the debt.
Facts.
And then because these are harsh words on both.
Bill does his homework, you guys.
He said, "Do you really mean that? And you were used to living big, loving big, spending big, giving big because you were from Texas. And that's just what we do." So you refer to, after all this, in your book, you talk about fighting, and this is a money fight. And we know that 50% of marriages end up in divorce, and money is the primary factor. You refer to fighting as a dance. And I found this really interesting. Can you tell us why you refer to fighting as a dance?
Yeah, that was one of the insights that we got from a behavioral therapist when we were doing research for the book, but it reflected the way that we had always talked and thought about our relationship and the role that money plays in it. But basically the idea that it's a dance is that each of you have your own narrative running in the back of your head. Some of it can be identity based on where you're from. Like, I'm from Texas, we do things big. Or I'm Jamaican, we work multiple jobs. Or I come from a long line of teachers, so I have to teach in schools. I have to do these things. Everybody has their own narrative going in their head, and you should think of it as a song. And so when there is a conflict, it's usually because one person is listening to, I don't know, Barry White, and the other person is listening to Drake. And you can't get on the same page because you are hearing different songs. And so what we practiced was emotional attunement, which is trying to get into the same rhythm, trying to ask the right questions, take the right tone, find the right environments, the right times to have conversations so that you can be attuned emotionally with your partner and actually make progress in the conversations that you're having. Otherwise, it just sounds like someone's nagging you or blaming you or judging you instead of actually just inquiring about, like, how can we move forward with this shared problem that we have?
Yeah. Well, Bill is quoting a lot of your relationship stuff in your book, but I have to say my big takeaways from the book, Cashing Out, and, still out there on Amazon, still to me, one of those seminal books that you could always go back to. It really spoke to me because, I retired early, 2019, and I really didn't title it that way, but that's kind of exactly what I feel like I did. A lot of us are brought up, you work your, 20, 30, 40 years with corporate America. That's how you do it. You get a good job with good benefits. That's what I was taught. And the idea of like walking away, cashing out, as you say, and you're still going to be okay. Like that makes a huge difference. So you talked a lot about that 15-year career philosophy. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm thinking about what's been going on this year, a lot of layoffs, especially with the federal government. And I feel like that book is kind of almost has new meaning for a lot of people today, because when it comes to a job, you're not the only one in the formula, right? Even if you love your job, the boss could say you're gone, or somebody else that you don't even know can say that's it. And now you got to figure something out. So I love this idea of this 15 career philosophy. Now, I worked a lot longer than that. It was 21 years for this last company. But honestly, I wish I would have had this book, and I wish I would have done it early.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And I completely agree with you because we've received so many notes from new readers, and we believe it's from people who read it when the book came out and they're realizing that the moment and the time that we're in is a great introduction and springboard. So I believe there are a lot of people who've read the book sort of in that earlier wave when it was first released that are now recommending it to a lot of the people that they see are struggling and dealing with managing the debt, managing the money, managing the stress that comes with their experiences in the workplace, and just trying to find this balance between just the constant looming threat of a layoff and that creating this domino effect of just life completely falling apart. But what we've recommended in our book is to begin with the end in mind. Or if you think about it like a vacation, if you were planning a vacation, like many of us do, let's say to the Caribbean, and you happen to check the forecast and you realize that it's going to rain at a minimum, you would reevaluate what you're going to pack. Maybe you're going to bring a couple extra pairs of shoes. Maybe you're going to bring a different umbrella, or maybe you're going to cancel certain things that you had planned because you realize that it may not be wise to particularly do that. And what we find that a lot of people do is they walk into their careers very much wide-eyed. What do they call it? Like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And they just believe that everything's going to be perfect. Like once I'm in, and everything's perfect. But I think those who've been around the block a little bit more know that life changes both in your household and in that experience, whether it's a new manager or just a completely different environment that creates a lot of pressure and makes that second year and that third year feel very differently from the first. And so the 15-year career is basically looking at your career instead of this 30, 40-year, however long you want it to be, sort of marathon, and shrinking that into a bit of a 15-year sprint that's broken up into 5-year sort of increments. The first 5 years with respect to managing your debt is really being aggressive and doing everything that you can to get that under control, keeping your cost of living as low or as reasonably low as possible, with the primary focus of paying off that debt and maximizing your investing. Years 6 through 10 are really around recognizing that you've gone through that period. And now with this extra cash flow or extra cushion that you have from paying off that debt, you can really ramp up your investments above and beyond the standard recommended 10 to 15%. And naturally, what you find, especially over investing, let's say over 7-year periods or 10-year periods, you start to realize at some point that your money is earning a significantly greater amount of money than it may have in the early years. And I think that's really important because by then you've worked 10 years and you're really starting to, like, you're a wiser investor. And so rather than continuing to believe that you have to stay where you are, what we're also challenging people to do is to say, now let's start thinking about this last leg, this last 5 years. And this is you finding other ways to earn income separate from the way that you're earning income now, whether it's real estate, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's a small business or partnering with someone to do something. And what that does is it creates a bit of a third leg to your financial arsenal. You've already paid off your debt. You're earning money through your primary job. That's one. But now you've got an income or interest growing in your accounts, which is 2. Now you've got this third leg, which is your ability to earn income on your own, doing whatever it is that you want to do. But we want to encourage people to take their time to do that. You don't want to just sort of quit, walk away from your job at year 9 or year 10 and think that podcasting or woodworking is going to be the thing that sort of leads you to financial freedom. Like, use your brain and use your time to your advantage and try some things out, pressure test it. Maybe it doesn't work out and you're grateful for it so that you have some more time to find something else. And if you spend 5 years doing that, you'll figure several things out. And hopefully one of those things is that you can also earn income on your own. And at that point, you've got 15 years, maybe 10 to 15 years of money that has been contributed and compounding on your behalf. You've completely paid off your debt. You've got interest earning on your behalf. And now you've got this last leg. And everybody's life is going to be a little different. Everybody's sort of third stool or income generating activity is going to be different. But by then you have a security blanket that most people would just completely dream of. And at that point, you can afford to embrace risk. And one of those things that we would encourage people to do for several reasons, but just focusing on the financial ones, is that you can choose to comfortably bet on yourself. And that's what that 15-year plan is really about, because we find so many people who reach that 15, 20-year mark, and the only thing they know how to do is what they've done. They've never tried to do anything else. They've never had the courage, or they've never had the financial support to do anything else, and they end up living a life of regrets. We're trying to encourage people to sort of solve for that, structure it in a way while giving them enough time to do it with some training wheels on.
Yes, I love that. And the 15-year thing, I kind of have a similar, what's funny is I have a similar approach, but for physicians, maybe it's a little different, because I said work 20 for the money and the rest for joy. Pay off your debt in 5, take 15 years to get financially free. And then if you want to do the same thing, so be it, but you don't have to do the same thing. And it does, as you say, allow you to launch into exercising the creative side of your brain, the entrepreneurial side of your brain, the right side of your brain, as opposed to living in left brain. What do you think about that, Kiersten?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's exactly the idea, just packaged a little different. But I think people short themselves when they don't take advantage of that right side of their brain later on in life. Like, the only time we're really structurally encouraged to do that is when we're in elementary school and middle school. And it's like, but your 40-year-old brain, your 50-year-old brain has all that wisdom, all those experiences, all these stories. You're in such a great position to creatively add so much value to the world, but you're stuck sending emails and hopping on Zoom all day. And this just gives you the option. If that's what you want to do, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum. If that's what you want to do, you can continue to do that. But any moment you don't feel like doing that, or you want to switch it up, you have this self-built safety net that no one can take away from you, and this confidence, because you're doing this not just for money, but for fulfillment and joy, that changes the rest of your life. Like, to me, it's such a key component to quality of life, is welcoming new experiences and getting new tastes of capabilities and experience in the world in a different way. And to give that up just because, you're not in school anymore, it just feels like such a miss culturally.
Can I add a couple more points to that? Because I think there's so many other things. It's a big conversation, but there's so much that I think gets missed in this, like above and beyond the money. But let's say you were following Bill's approach, right? What I think most people underestimate is that it actually makes you a better doctor, because you're not just thinking about what you need to do to get the promotion. You're not doing it for the money anymore. You're doing it for the love of the practice, or whatever it is. If you're an accountant or a lawyer or whatever it is, you're not there because you're just trying to get promoted. You're trying to make partner or whatever it is. You're doing it because you love doing what you're doing. And when you get to that point, your entire life changes. Above and beyond that, if you are in a relationship, it makes you a better partner, right? Because you don't really have to bring work home. You're not grinding nearly as much. It makes you a better parent because you have much more stamina to actually be there. Parenting is a full-time job in and of itself. So it just makes you a better, more well-rounded person, aside from the money or even sort of the creative, artistic sides of our life experience. It just makes you a better, I think, and a more whole person. And that's the real rationale for wanting to do this, or I think for deciding to make these kinds of financial and career decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's like your regrets live in your right brain. I just thought of that, and I'm like, yeah. If I hadn't have used my right brain to create this podcast with Jackie, there would be no legacy other than the day job.
I love that.
Well, I love that you guys are normalizing the shorter period of time. Back in the day, and probably what all of our parents told us and what society generally told us was 30 or 40 years was what it took. And now we're talking 15 with a very easy to follow, actionable plan or framework in this book. And I think even when our late starters, they've already kind of got some of what you were talking about. Like, for instance, they've already started their career. And I think sometimes, let's say they're, their late 30s or early 40s, they're like, it's too late for me. I can't do anything. Well, think 15 years, you're still retiring early. At this point. So it doesn't. So if we can get away from this 30 and 40-year time horizon, maybe late starters won't feel so much like late starters. So that was one of my big takeaways and what I loved about the book. And I think a lot of our late starters, it will resonate with them that what they thought was such a longer time horizon doesn't have to be as long as they think.
Yeah. And I think this is where financial literacy kind of kind of crashes with tech literacy. Because one of the reasons for the shortened timeline is because of all the advances in technology and even just investing in the ways that you can invest, the frequency, the means in which you can invest. All of that has changed in the last 4 decades. So it might have had to be 30 to 40 years when there was a time where you needed at least $20,000 to open a brokerage account and you had to go see a financial advisor and deposit the check manually. Now you can round up every purchase you make on a regular basis and you're investing every single time you swipe. Like those changes change the timeline. And the more literate you are, like even when we talk to Gen Z or Gen Alpha, which is my son's generation, they're like 11 right now. 15 years sounds like a long time. Like it just sounds like, why do we need to wait 15 years? And that's because they don't have the same restrictions we do. When at my age, you had to wait till you were 16 before you could earn money. Now you can earn money at any age, doing anything. And so, yeah, it's going to continue to shrink. What needs to change to accommodate it is our mindset around how long things need to take and what is the best, highest use of our time while we're here.
Oh, that mindset is like so powerful. And you guys put so much in the book to kind of deal with that and just to frame things differently and think of things in a different way. So when you guys were talking about, before you leave your job, kind of get that creative thing going on. So for you guys, that obviously was your first big project, Rich and Regular. The blog is still around, but you guys did some cool articles, cool blog posts early in the day. So you left your jobs at different times. Julien, you left yours first?
I left my job in 2018.
Okay. When did the blog start?
2017.
Okay. So you had that going and Kiersten was still working in 2018. Yeah. Okay. So how did you part from your job, Julien?
It was a pretty horrific story, actually. I mean, I didn't have plans on leaving until we'd achieved a few more financial milestones. But at that point, we'd had a paid off mortgage on our then primary home, and we'd picked up a rental property. I don't believe we paid it off. I don't think we did pay that one off, but it was providing positive cash flow, supplemental cash flow. But I had basically a really bad situation at work where I realized, and I won't go through all the details, but I just had enough. And I said, I didn't quite have FU money at the time, but I don't have to deal with this bleed money. And that's what I chose to do shortly thereafter, shortly after my son was born. And I was just thinking about the kind of examples and the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell, not just to myself, but to him. And I did not want to tell this story of his father kind of taking mistreatment and abuse from this place of pride. I'd rather tell a story that your father made the courageous decision and figured something out. And I was right, because I believe, having seen so many of my friends and family and mentors who are older struggle with their abilities to connect with their children, that they underestimate what those kinds of moments and decisions do in shaping how their children ultimately decide to behave, or the decisions that their children ultimately make. And so I just didn't want the stench of trauma on me while I'm holding and trying to connect with my son. I wanted to just be free and be a better father. I was also mindful of the impact it had on my relationship with Kiersten. If we're being honest, I think we really underestimate what that does to our relationships when you, as a partner, decide that you will allow people to mistreat you because you need the paycheck, and then come home to your partner and expect to be intimate or expect to be sort of strong. It's no, you respectfully, and I understand this could be triggering for some people, but I can't believe you allowed that, And so why would you do that? And it's just, I didn't want it. And my situation was pretty bad, and I think people deal with that. It's now more common to talk about those things on social media, and there've been research and all those things to talk about specifically the experiences that Black people go through in these kinds of toxic corporate environments, to the extent now, irrespective of race, the Surgeon General has actually issued a warning against the impact of toxic workplaces. This is where we are.
Wow.
And so, to go back to Kiersten's earlier point around our mission around inspiring better conversations about money, yes, these things can feel taboo or cringe, but it's very real. These are the times and the moments that we're in, and there are financial implications and family and relationship and health implications for all of it. And so that's what we wanted to bring to the table. That's what we try to do with the work that we do. And that's what ultimately led me to leave and to pour more of myself into the intellectual property and the platforms that we own, as opposed to continuing to make an employer richer.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you guys are very interested in is social justice.
Yeah.
And how social justice and money are related. You say math is simple, Black life isn't. And what do you mean by that?
I go back to that instance of those moments, if you will. And, God, 2020 was tough. Like, I think we've all collectively just kind of glanced by it, like, aside from COVID, like, it was a global event, right? Yeah.
But if you were a generation event.
Yeah. But if you were also a person of color going through that time, or specifically a Black person going through that time, it was really, really tough. I mean, I remember traveling on business while there was just a slew of footage on social media and on the news of people being shot by the police. And I remember and reflecting with my friends, and all of them just kind of acting like, we can feel this in private, but we can't bring that to work. We can't be ourselves at work. You can't express yourself. You can't be human. And I just remember being really concerned about the effect that would have on our mental health as a culture and as a community. But specifically, I remember being really concerned about the effect that would have on our kids, the fact that we're just absorbing this trauma and pretending like it doesn't exist every single day. And now here we are 5 years after, not to pick on corporate America, but 5 years after corporate America saying, oh, we promise we're going to do all of these things, making billions of dollars of pledges that they're going to change things around, and them openly saying, actually, never mind, things are fine the way they were. Mm-hmm. And so
things were better.
Things that were right. And
the way they were is what they're saying.
Right. And so part of what I think we're trying to accomplish is unavoidable. We don't really have the privilege of just being able to look at the numbers and letting that be the deciding factor around whether or not we decide to pursue financial independence. I think for some people, it's a matter of improving your quality of life. I think for other people, it's a matter of long-term survival. It's a necessity that you remove yourself from environments that have historically done harm to you. And so the motivations are different, right? That's what we mean by Black life being a bit more complicated. The math is the math, right? Whatever happens in the stock market is going to happen in the stock market or real estate or whatever financial endeavor you do. But the motivations that lead you to pursue those things and the journey that you experience is going to be very, very different depending on who you are. And so we realized, as people who are pretty smart, that you can't always appeal to the brains and the rational side of people. You have to show them the other factors that influence their financial lives. And that's really what we wanted to do, not just with the book, but with pretty much everything that we do.
Kiersten, did you have similar experiences to Julien that influenced you in leaving your job as well?
No, I was doing great professionally, and that was because of a lot of very strategic decisions in terms of the jobs that I took and the roles that I took on. And while he was having a really hard time at work, my trajectory was going up. I was getting promoted. My salary was still growing. I was beloved in the organization. Doesn't mean that those issues did not exist, just in the very small pocket of the org that I was in, I just didn't experience them. What did lead me to eventually quit was noticing the distance between the two of us. Like when he quit his job and I was still working, like he had the nerve to have a good life without me. He was enjoying the city and finding coffee shops to work at and watching film and reading books. And when we'd come home and I'd get into my normal rut about somebody emailing me and CCing somebody else and then put me on hold and I had to do that. I would complain about work and he would just remind me that it doesn't matter. And like, why are you so affected by it? And I think this happens in a lot of couples who have different types of jobs, or maybe one person stays at home and the other person has a stressful job, but it just creates this tension. We no longer had the shared experience to build our relationship on. And that was very, very hard for me. For so long, work had been the thing. We met at work. So for so long, work had been the thing that we talked about and that we shared experiences and stories with. And now it just felt like I was dating a stranger. And he was having a really good time and I was not. And that was
You
my motivation.
You wanted to join the party, huh?
Yeah, like how dare you have a good day?
What year was it when how much later after Julien left his job did you leave your job?
So I started seriously considering it a year after he left his job. So mid 2019. And it took me 6 months to decide.
That's a hard decision, right?
Oh yeah. I waffled back and forth because I also had some ego stuff that I needed to work through. At the time I was a breadwinner and I took a lot of pride in being the breadwinner. I had earned the role that like was at the top of my career list. I was a director before I had turned 40. And like, I just had like all this stuff wrapped up into the decision. But by that Christmas, I had decided like we had a wonderful Christmas break with our son. We had some business deals that we were expecting early in the next year in 2020. And so I was like, this is it. This is my sign. So I went to work on February 14th, 2020 and turned in my notice.
Yeah,
Valentine's Day. I love me more than I love my job. Like, here is my notice. Little did I know that 6 weeks later, the world would shut down.
Wow. Yeah.
I had known then.
Yeah, your timing is impeccable. Oh my gosh.
That's what happened. I turned in my notice and then COVID hit like 3, maybe 4 weeks later, it was official. And you know, the ball was already rolling. And at the time we thought like, oh, this is just a 2-week thing. Like, yeah, it'll be fine after 2 weeks. Everybody stay home. No. Yeah.
Well, and that's part of how we know you guys, because Julien spoke at Economy that year. Mm-hmm. It was March of 2020. So I didn't realize, Kiersten, you had just quit your job at the end of the year. So yeah, Julien spoke. We'll drop the link in the show notes, but he did an amazing, that's when you shared some of your shelf skills in that talk, I remember. But yeah, so we all were there. I remember we had rehearsal that day and we were coming in. It was still the whispers. Like you said, it's just 2 weeks. I think somebody even said it was still a hoax. Now, again, this is March 2020. We learned different. And I think when I came in, I was like, oh, I'm a hugger. So I'm like, oh, I don't know if you're supposed to hug. We're supposed to elbow. They were saying just, it was a crazy time, you guys. It was I didn't know you guys had all that going on at the time. So that's interesting. Here's another thing I remember about 2020 from you guys, that MarketWatch Fire Starters video. The title of it was "This Couple Believes Fire Will Create More Black Millionaires." And that was one of the most viewed, I think over 600,000 views, the most viewed Fire Watchers or Fire Starters MarketWatch video. That was a very popular series. Tell us about that and putting that together and what message you were trying to send.
That was such a fun time. I think that was 2020. I don't remember the year.
I think it said 2020. You know what? You guys probably recorded it way before then.
We probably recorded in 2019. I don't remember. It was right around then.
It's crazy that it seems that long ago. I'll start over.
It was September 2019 when we filmed it.
Okay. I remember that was one of our earlier experiences with media because they sent out a videographer who we've, grown to love and have connected with several times since. But it was the first time we actually really experienced that. I think he was with us for about 2 or 3 days, and we were dragging him all around the country. He just wanted to keep on recording and recording. And it was such an unusual experience for us. We'd never done anything like that before, but we just decided to be ourselves. And again, at that moment, there were just so many things going on through our mind. We felt so wildly financially empowered. We felt really inspired by the financial independence for our early community. We were flush with cash. We had a young kid. We had properties. I mean, we were just doing really, really well. And at the same time, we also knew that underneath it all, a lot of our friends and our peers who were doing well were really, really frustrated at work. They were routinely passed over. We just accepted the fact that there was this pay gap, and I certainly experienced that. I know several of our other peers who had experienced that. And I think for us, and by us, I mean not just Kiersten and I, but I mean for people in the city of Atlanta, which for most people would agree is like the epicenter of Black wealth in the country. If we're experiencing these kinds of issues in our own city, it was such a red flag around how slippery the corporate ladder was for a lot of people like us. And so it felt as if this was a moment that we really needed to pay close attention to. And so we wanted to make sure that we can help people connect those dots and let them know that they were not alone in their frustrations and that the pathway out may not necessarily look the way that you think it does. But if there's one thing we know for sure, is that if you really, really focus on your money, really get a grip on managing your debt, and trust that the stock market is going to do what it has historically done, you will find yourself with a wider set of options than you would compared to what most people do, which is just pour themselves into work and then hope that they get lucky and fortunate in getting a promotion.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, just to reiterate the 5 reasons to cash out, you've got 5 big ones, and you refer to more time, as you mentioned, to do what you love. You have safety from constant corporate change, as we've talked about. I just want to iterate them so people understand why cashing out is so important. You've increased the likelihood of success on your own terms, the entrepreneurism, the right side of the brain. And you create the family, as you said, that you want. It improves your relationship with your spouse. It improves your relationship with your kid. You're able to coach his sports as opposed to scramble to find a way to watch them. And then one that we've talked about before, freedom from burnout. That, I think, is a critical one. Can you tell us about why freedom from burnout is so important?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people misunderstand about burnout is they assume that it comes naturally just from working really hard at something or spending a lot of time or a lot of effort on something. That's not burnout. That doesn't inherently cause burnout. Burnout comes from spending a bunch of time on something that you don't believe you have control over. It's from spending time and energy over something that you don't think you actually can impact the outcome. And so when we say freedom from burnout, it doesn't mean that we don't ever get tired. It doesn't mean that we don't ever have exhausting long days. But the difference now is that we are choosing the things that are hard in our lives. We're choosing the things that we work on. We're choosing the places and the times where we want to be exhausted. And we feel like we have control over the levers in our life. And that's the whole point, is to not feel like there's some boogeyman like directing your every move, or that you need to step out of one skin and into another one just to earn a living. Like, you should be able to be a whole human as often, preferably like all the time, but as often as you want to be. And that feeling, trying to describe that feeling is like trying to describe what salt tastes like. Like, you just know if it's not there. You just know if it needs a little something. And a lot of people feel that right now. And the language that we have to describe it is so polarizing. Like, if you say somebody's burnt out, they'll say, no, I'm not burnt out. Or if you say someone needs to retire, they say, no, I don't know what I don't know what I would do if I didn't have a job. And there's so much in between. And that's part of the fun. This is our right brain exercise, is coming up with new ways to describe that gray area where you do have agency and choice. That's why we called it cashing out. It's not a one-time event. You can do it as many times as you want. Like, you can go into the casino, run it up, cash out, take a break, go back in if you want. But you don't, it's not as limited as our minds, our language, and our work culture have made us believe, have led us to believe.
Yeah.
You're talking about autonomy. Yeah. You're talking about self-determination. Mm-hmm. You're talking in many ways about entrepreneurship. People talk about everybody has a story and a book in them. Maybe everybody has an entrepreneur in them too.
Yeah, I would also add to that, specific to the audience that we were trying to speak to and reach with that book, is that I want you to take just as much pride in rest as you do in your work ethic, or in your ability to be excellent all the time, right? These are parts of the culture that we recognize had a double-edged sword to it. And we were just letting people know that, hey, there's some consequences to the standard that you're trying to uphold. The idea of, being tired when you recognize that your ancestors, gave their lives to get you where they are, is both true and destructive, right? Like, if I'm tired, I owe it to myself to acknowledge the fact that I am tired, because maybe there's something else going on here. And so we can't always finish those sentences with, my pain, my struggle, and my fatigue pales in comparison to what the people had to do before me to get me where I am. Like, sometimes you just have to have room to feel whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment, and then making the best decision based on the environment and the options that are available to you.
Yeah, let me just tell you, you guys' voice is so important in the fire community because you were doing things quite different. So I love the MarketWatch video, but it didn't stop there. I love the book, but it didn't stop there. I really love Money on the Table. You guys created this mini series. I mean, it should be on the big screen, and it probably was at some point. But I love that you guys were having these regular money conversations so much fun around something that Julian loves, cooking, great food. It was because of you, Julian, that I know how to properly half an avocado.
Without cutting your palm.
People dream of marrying an MBA to help them manage the finances. People dream of marrying a chef.
Yes.
It takes that. And you got both, Kiersten. You got the whole package.
I did.
That's the intro to the podcast episode. Keep that part.
There you go. So Money on the Table, it was this very high quality, we watch a lot of YouTube videos and stuff, but this was a high quality, movie quality. I don't know if it's 4K or whatever it is. High quality to begin with, but also quality in terms of the content and the conversations that you were having. And you were doing it where most families naturally come together at the table, eating meals. And that's what the whole series was about. I'm like, this is genius. And some of those conversations, it just felt like we were just a fly on the wall, just watching what you guys were talking about. And I hope that's what you were going for. But I think that was such an important creation of your content that touched so many people. So I don't know, how did that even come about?
Well, it's exactly what you said, and that was exactly the intention. But it came about because we, like a lot of people who in the early stages of their financial journey, like go all in and you start consuming every book, podcast, video that you can. And we were fortunate in that we were also able to meet some of the people that we were really inspired by. But what we noticed was the person that we heard on stage at Economy or at FinCon was very different from the person that we met in the lobby and had a drink with. And we're big fans of Anthony Bourdain, and we said, like, that's what we want to unlock, right? Like, I want to unlock that.
We like it real because what you did was reality TV.
Yeah.
These are real conversations. These are spontaneous, unedited, probably.
That's really, well, it's highly edited because I'm pretty long-winded. But that's what we were trying to unlock, is that the real value of what you want to hear from someone comes from when you surprise and delight them with something delicious. And so, we thought about the people that we admired. I remember asking Vicki Robbins what her favorite pastry was. We met with her in New York and we were actually having a meal with her about politics at the time. And I was like, this is the conversation that people want to have. Not the one that people, everyone puts a mask on to a certain extent when there's a camera in front of them. But I just realized that what they really, really want to hear is like Vicki use foul language, or it's the 10 minutes before the conversation with JL, or it's the conversation with Paula, outside of whatever, or Mr. Money Mustache, or whoever your financial hero is. Like, that's what we really, really wanted. And we realized that food just had a remarkable way of bringing that out of people. And we wanted to capture that. And so we were very much inspired by Anthony Bourdain, and still am till this day. There's another series called Breakfast, Lunch, and Dinner on Netflix by a chef called David Chang. But also there was Coffee in a Car with Jerry Seinfeld, where he basically...
Comedians in a car
getting coffee is what it's called, with Seinfeld, where he basically interviews all of his comedian friends in a car that was inspired by them. So an Eddie Murphy car is going to be different from, let's say, a Dana Carvey car. I'm just making it up. But that's what we were really inspired by and what we tried to recreate with Money on the Table. And we were really just shocked that nobody owned it. And so we also locked up that intellectual property.
Yes, you guys are geniuses. So I have a question for you guys. Do you have any tips for my co-host here? Because his kids called him Lecture Daddy. Is there any other good ways for him to have money conversations with? So his kids, he has twins, and they are what, 26, Bill?
Right, just about.
26. So how does he shake off the Lecture Daddy title?
I don't think you can. That's
actually great.
It's pretty hopeless, I have to wait for them to come to me with their questions.
But along those lines, what we were mindful of, right? Because in the very early stages of our entrepreneurial careers, we thought we could outsmart our audience, and we realized actually that they're really smart people. You know what I mean? And so for every argument that you make around why they should pursue financial independence, they're going to come up with some counter argument that's really strong. And we realized that, and this has been a bit of our mantra, is to aim for the heart instead of the head. And that tends to be a far greater way to influence people's behaviors. And so that would be my advice to you, Bill, is to aim for the heart, find the thing that inspires them, find the thing that really, really, scares them. That more often than showing them more numbers or trying to combat their point of view with math, I think tends to be the thing that sticks and then ultimately leads to them finding their own pathway to change.
Yeah. I agree, and thanks for the advice. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, I had to dime you out, Bill.
I've heard of myself before, but it is parenting and evolution.
Yeah.
And waiting for the student to come and trying to instill not necessarily numbers, but the simple messages: save first, spend last.
Exactly.
Max out your 401k. It doesn't take many tips to get it right.
Yeah.
So one of the topics that you had since we're on the topic of parents, was when you guys were talking to Julian's mother at the table, and you had the discussion about your guys are the sandwich generation. I think that was one of your most popular episodes, but I love that episode as well, to have your mom there and you somewhat support her. And that's another thing that a lot of our late starters deal with. So I wonder if you could talk about that just a little bit.
You want me to, or I guess I could. Yeah. So, we do, and we still support my mom. That experience has gone up and down since we shot that particular episode. But, the reason why we wanted to cover that topic is because we also realized that was actually one of the primary reasons why a lot of the people that we were trying to reach chose to hang on to their jobs, is because it wasn't just about them. Like, they really, really were afraid to step out on their own. Even though they had the resources, they had the capabilities, it was that they were not just the risk of failure was significantly higher for them because they were also financially supporting a parent, in some cases, multiple parents. And in some cases, those parents had special needs. And so it was that suffocating fear that we really wanted to show people was a way to combat some of the issues and the challenges that they were dealing with. But yeah, it's very prevalent. I imagine it's more prevalent now than it was when we initially approached that topic of conversation in that episode. I believe that was season 2 of Money on the Table. But I don't think it changes anything. If anything, it to me just makes it a bit more urgent with respect to why people should be investing more aggressively and why they should be looking for ways to earn income outside of their day jobs, because the labor market and the job market is really, really tough these days. And so while people can argue all day that entrepreneurship isn't easy, you certainly have a lot more flexibility than you do with a job. And so we were just trying to help lead people to their own conclusion there. But it's one of those things where there really isn't an easy answer.
Kiersten, haven't you had issues on your side with the sandwich generation and things you've had to deal with as well?
Not the same kind. My parents don't rely on us or need us for financial support. They do need a lot of just hands-on family time. They both retired in the last 7 or 8 years. My dad had cancer for a little while and is thankfully in remission right now. But it's still something that, we look to all the time. And it still requires a different muscle, right? It's not money, but it still requires time, patience, resourcefulness, the willingness to get on the phone to help them sort through all of the things that you have to sort through. My dad is a tinkerer. He loves tech. And even when he realized how much was involved in just navigating retirement, whether it's Social Security or Medicare or taxes, or he's got a little side hustle, he's got all kinds of things happening. He started building this app that would just serve as like a resource guide for his family members. And even he just putting it on paper was just like, there's no obviously we know there are books out there and resources because of the personal finance community, but it's not like you get a pamphlet on the last day of work that says, here's how you structure your life now that you don't have coworkers or an HR department who does all of this stuff for you. And it's a lot to maintain. And especially for people who didn't necessarily grow up with computers or in this digital environment, there's a lot that you have to keep up with. And And there's a lot of adjustments that they need to make in order to do things simply like going to the doctor's office and checking in on an iPad. And so they require support just because they're older, but not necessarily from a financial perspective.
Well, that's great. You create your own HR department.
Yeah.
You help people exit the building and still have an HR department. Your dad's a genius as well, just like you guys.
Yeah. And Kiersten, I'm so glad to hear that your dad is doing better. So I was kind of asking also from a lens of, I just found out my daughter's pregnant, so I'm going to be a grandmother.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to tell you guys that last month, but now she's over the first trimester and it is like full on now, but she'll be kind of in the middle as I'm getting, I mean, for a while, she don't have to worry about me, but as time goes on, you know, she will be an adult. She'll be in her 30s or 40s and she'll have, you know, a teenager and then she'll have me. And I don't know. I just always wondered kind of how that plays out because it could get tricky. Like you said, it's a very unique, two different dynamics that you got to deal with. But hopefully, so Bo, is he appreciating having his grandparents around?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that makes him such a special kid is that he has all of these multi-generational friendships, right? He doesn't even have like a grandson, grandparent relationship with our parents. Like they're his homies. Like they're good friends.
And homie too.
Yeah. So I would look forward to that. I'm like, I feel like, I mean, I'm sure I was excited when I was pregnant with my daughter way back in the day, but I am just so excited to have this grandbaby and we live pretty close. So I'm looking forward to it.
Anytime I meet an older person who is just not aiming wondrously, but just got a little lost, like just looking for something, I always tell them to find a young person, whether it's a 7-year-old or a teenager, because there's so much wisdom that these kids are missing because the gap between generations is so wide. And one of the reasons Bo is such an enjoyable kid, like whenever teachers ask, like, how is he so gentle? How is he so calm? He's such a good listener. And it's like, well, his best friends are like 78 and 77. You ain't got a choice but to be a great listener because, his grandparents talk at a different pace. They tell a story in a different way. They take the scenic route. And he has developed a liking for it. Like he has a tolerance for it. It's not all screen and, quick cuts and changing the video when you don't like it anymore. And so it's just, I hope that you get to spend as much time with your grandbaby as you want, because I'm telling you that perspective is so important and so missing in our young people. And they need it. They need it to adjust their timelines, their expectations, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're talking about is what you talk about in your book too, community and multi-generational community.
Mm-hmm.
You say, come for the content, but stay for the community.
That's it.
And that's what we're all about. That's what we find, you're not alone in your journey. And you need to embrace the fact that you can't do it alone, right?
Yes, that's
it.
Yeah.
And you guys know we are a podcast about late starters. You did a whole episode on late starters that I really loved. And Julie, you were saying you were at some event and you had an individual, I think it was a lady that stood up and said, what if it's too late for me, kind of flippantly? So I'd love to hear that exchange. And I think our audience might get value from it too.
Yeah, Jackie set me up.
I know. Give him the censored version.
Yeah. So, I still have a little bit of spice in me. And so, as someone who's very passionate about the work that they do, and, I make deliberate decisions around how I want to spend my time, we were asked to do a speaking engagement. I think, Jackie, you were a part of this speaking engagement or this sort of series as well. And so it was here in the city of Atlanta. And I remember having this conversation and we opened it up for Q&A, and there was a woman who stood up. And the reason why I made the quick decision to be a bit more aggressive than I normally do was because I could read in her tone that she was annoyed a little bit by what I was suggesting, which was you just have to make these tough decisions. And it was around paying off her dad and investing and all the things that we normally talk about. And she was like, well, what if you just don't do it? Or something like that, right? Was that what it was? Something like, what if you just don't do it? Or I asked the question, like, what do you think happens? Or something like that. And I said, damn, I forgot what I said. What did I say?
She asked the question, is it too late for me?
Oh, is it too late?
I've heard y'all, everything y'all said.
That's
it sounds good. All these people around me are excited about it and ready to use the knowledge. But she told us her age and she said, are you sure it's not too late for me? Or I think it's too late for me.
And I said, well, what if I said it is? What if I told you that it was, right? And the point that I was making was we find that some people just refuse to take accountability over their own finances, their own decisions. They want to put that on somebody else. And so since we were presenting ourselves as the experts of the day, she wanted to put that pressure on me to determine whether or not it was too late for her. And I understood where she was coming from, but the bigger point that I wanted to make to her is that it's up to you. And dare I suggest that part of the problem is that you continue to avoid this accountability. Like, this decision is ultimately yours. I can give you my advice. I can quote all kinds of studies. But if I've been talking for 45 minutes or an hour, however long it is, about and being pretty clear on what our point of view is, I think for you to ask that question the way that she did was, to me, a greater reflection that she just had in some ways given up. And I didn't want her to give up on herself. Right. I was like, that decision is ultimately yours. Don't give that decision to me. Don't give that decision to anyone else. No one should care more about your money than you. And so, yeah, that was the exchange. And, I hope she made the right decision.
Yeah. I mean, no one's coming to save us.
Yeah, not one person. No one.
The only one that can save you is you and your community, because you can't do it alone either, as we said. Mm-hmm. But that's what I realized is no one's coming to save me. I got to take care of myself. I've got to, convert from being a spender to a saver. And that's not easy. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, but that was some serious food for thought. And I hope that all of our audience, the one thing that they've done right, they're listening to a podcast. Many of them have joined our Facebook group. If you haven't joined yet, come on in there. We're having these conversations, and people are not perfect. And so they're talking about the gritty truth, the things that they've done wrong. There's shame, there's regret, there's all these things. But you've said, I want to do something different. And that's something that this lady in the audience didn't say. She didn't say not at that point, but I'm sure she probably thought a little more deeply about it. And maybe that was something that she kind of needed to get her wheels turning in another direction. So, good on you. We get that all the time. So hopefully she at least tried to think about doing something different. So Kiersten, so I'm back to you. So you mentioned some unconventional tips about investing as you get older. And it wasn't just about the portfolio that I really loved. And I think our audience will get value from kind of how you were thinking about this whole investment as you get older. It didn't have any, and I don't know if, it wasn't in the book, Bill. So Bill may not even know, but it wasn't just about the numbers, the dollars and the cents. And even while the stock market is going down, it didn't even matter, but it was back to community that Bill was mentioning. And you were saying, and I've never heard anyone like think of it in those terms, the people around you, the people that can support you, like there's value to that I think some of us take for granted.
Yes, I remember now because I also wrote about this on LinkedIn. But yeah, I was talking about investing in your community and focusing on being a better neighbor. A lot of us are in this place where you don't know your neighbors' names. And I don't just literally mean next door, but like you should have 5 people's phone numbers who live within a 5 to 10 mile radius or minutes. I don't know if you're in a city or in a suburban area. Y'all know what I mean. But someone in close vicinity to you, you should have their numbers. You should be a regular at a restaurant or a dry cleaners or a park. You just want to be known in your community so that when something happens, not if, but when, you have this local safety net, this local community that can help you. And you never know how people can help you. Like we've been more civic minded the last couple of years than we ever have in our entire lives. And that's largely because of our son and the fact that he's in public school, and public schools need a lot of hands-on support, whether you have a student there or not. He's in Little League. We're volunteering a lot of our time. And the ways that we've been able to help people are things that I would have never thought. It's the simple things. It's like giving someone a shovel or bringing in, antifreeze, or like
helping with technology.
Helping with technology. I mean, it's little bitty stuff.
This is the perfect opportunity to give a shout out to one of your favorite charities, because during COVID, you donated to an organization a cooler. You bought 2, and it was about community, it was about neighborhood, and you realized that there was somebody out there that was feeding the people that needed it most. I believe the charity was called Umi Feeds.
Correct.
You find them at UMIFEEDS.org. We always like to give a shout out to a charity, and thank you for giving me the perfect opportunity to give a shout out to yours.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for as much work as we do and as you all do in the personal finance space, one of the things that we just did not see enough of was giving, right? Like there are those of us who are doing well, and there are some of us who are doing incredibly well. And there are tons of highlight reels on social media, but there just simply was not enough examples of people giving. And so instead of a promotion and shouting out something being on sale, we wanted to say, hey, we're giving something away, and we wanted our community to help us to point us in the right direction. So we're glad they helped us find Umi Feeds, and she's continued to do really great work.
Yeah.
Well, Jackie, we have covered so many wonderful things here today.
Yes.
Our conversation could go on forever with you. Good thing we know these guys and we could sit down at the table, break bread as we did at FinCon, and have ongoing chats with them, because there is so much value here for our audience. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Jackie, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to know. I know you guys are always up to something. So what have you got going on right now that you want to share with our audience? Of course, they can get the book, they can go to the YouTube channel, Money on the Table, and they can go to the podcast. But what else are you guys working on right now?
This has been the year where we're focused on family. And so our creative projects, as much as we love them, we just completed one that we're really proud of called Taste the Impact, which is focused on values-aligned investing and viewing that through the lens of food, which is, normally what we do. So we just wrapped that up, and now we're getting prepared for summer with our son and just making sure that he has a great foundation as he starts the next phase of his life as an 8-year-old. And so most of our stuff has just been focused around family and continuing to advance the conversation around money so that people have something else to talk about besides just how much money they have and how much money they're spending.
Well, that's the other great thing about this is collaboration. We just had Janine Firpo on the show.
Oh, wonderful.
Her episode will air before yours, and that's perfect because Janine Firpo wrote the book, Activate Your Money. My sister's reading it. She's taking action on it, and you'll have heard about that before this. So go back to that episode and listen to it so that, how can you, what was it called? Impact?
So it's a mini documentary. It's less than 20 minutes long. It's called Taste the Impact.
Yeah. We'll make sure we drop that in the show notes.
Look for that coming out. God, this has been great. Julien and Kiersten, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for giving of your hearts, your minds, and your souls to our audience. We really, really appreciate it. We'll see you next week on Catching Up to Fi.
Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.